am terrified to make this video because there's a piece of me that feels like you should never really give advice on marriage because marriage is a two-way street made up of two imperfect human beings. There's highs and lows throughout marriage. I remember when I was dating my husband and I would hear people talk about challenges in marriage and I was like, well, what are the challenges? What do they look like? It used to really freak me out because we had a really good relationship. I've only been married 3 years. This is why I'm like, oh, should I be making this video? The reason I'm making it is because I am truly happily married. I asked my husband before I made this video, when I got the idea for it, I was like, Matt, do you think I'm qualified to make a video about how to be a good wife? Because obviously he would know more than anyone. He was like, yeah, I think you would have some good advice. I felt called to make this video about why I think I'm happily married because I want to see other people happily married. And I was thinking really in terms of what I could tell myself before I was married, even though I think this applies to anyone that is actually married. But if you're not married yet and you're trying to prepare for marriage, these are things that I definitely wish I knew for marriage. My first tip to women for being a good wife is to develop a strong relationship with Christ. Without my relationship with Christ, I could not have a happy marriage. It would not be possible. I think everything that we've been through together, I couldn't have handled those storms if I didn't know who God was, if I didn't believe in God and I didn't believe in God's plan and purpose for me, and I didn't believe that marriage was a covenant. When you get married, you are becoming one with someone else. It is a sacrament. You are binding yourself to another person and becoming one person. The both of you become one person. And it really is an incredible thing. Everything that affects your partner, everything that affects them affects you. Everything that affects you affects them. The best marriage advice I was ever given was to put Christ at the center of my marriage, to not look at my husband as God, but to look at my husband as my partner, my husband beside me and God in front of us. Because I think what happens in a lot of marriages is, especially if you don't have a relationship with God, but even if you do, I see this with people. They blame their spouse for the problems of life, or they look to their spouse and they think that their spouse has to fix everything. And at the end of the day, their spouse is a human being. There's so many things in life that are just so outside of our control and our plan. But when you have a faith in God and you believe that God is leading you and guiding you, you can turn to God in everything. I don't look to my husband when bad things happen and say, why did you let this bad thing happen? I look to God and I say, Lord, please help me see the truth in this situation. Lord, please help guide us. Please guide my husband in his decision making. Help guide me in my decision making. I turn to God in everything. I obviously look to my husband for guidance and wisdom, but I don't expect my husband to be God. Having that strong relationship with Christ will bless your marriage a millionfold. And I remember people telling me that when I was single, like, if you really want to have a husband, then you need to have a strong relationship with Christ. And I was like, no, me and God are good, whatever. I always put God on the back burner. I wanted God when I wanted God, but if I, in my daily life, I did not put God first. If you want to be happy, you have to put God first in everything. It's for married and unmarried people. You have to have a strong relationship with Christ and go to Christ every day. For me, that looks like I've prayed the rosary every day since 2017. 7 years, I've prayed the rosary every day. I sometimes say up to 3 rosaries a day. The Lord gives so many graces to you through the rosary. Receive the sacraments. When things are hard, I go to adoration all the time. I need to be close to God when things are hard because I know I need to hear God more clearly. We just weathered a really big storm in our family. My husband got laid off from his job. It was extremely stressful because we are a single income family. I am a stay-at-home mom, and it was really terrifying, but God just showed up for me in that season. He really took care of me. I found this book with a note from my mom. This verse right in it was Matthew 6:24 through 34. And the verse is all about how God takes care of all the birds and he takes care of all wildlife and the grass growing. He does all that for the birds. What more will he do for you? He loves you even more than the other creations of nature. God loves human beings the most. Not only does he love us the most, in that scripture, it also says he knows your needs. Sometimes I feel like I get lost in thinking that God doesn't care about my needs and wants, and that's such a lie. God not only knows what you need and want, he wants to fulfill the desires of your heart. He wants to bless you. He wants good for you. And that's what that whole message, Matthew 6:24 through 34, it's all about how God wants good for you. Not only does God want good for you, he knows you have needs and he wants to take care of them. If I didn't have that to cling on to, it would be easy to freak out or blame or try and control. And of course, there there were pieces of me that did do that. There were pieces of me that are human and weak, but I recognized my weakness. I didn't blame my husband for my weakness. I turned to God and asked for strength, and the Lord gave it to me. The Lord is very generous. The Lord is not a genie. He's not going to just do everything we ask for like that because we asked for it, because not everything we ask for is good for us, but He will provide. He will always provide, and you have to have faith in that, and you have to have a relationship with Christ if you want to be a good wife and you want to be happily married. If you want to find a good spouse, you need to have a relationship with Christ. As I said before, I don't think I would have been with my husband if I hadn't been praying the rosary regularly and really pursuing Christ. I needed God to remove the scales from my eyes. I was so blind as to what a healthy relationship looked like, and I don't think I would have been capable of identifying a good partner if it hadn't been for the grace of God. My second tip, how to be a good wife, is to face your demons. Everybody has their brokenness. Everybody has things from their past that are not ideal, broken relationships, parental relationships that need healing, and those things will arise in your marriage. Your marriage is the most intimate relationship you're ever going to have with somebody else. They see all of you and they become a mirror for you. And if you do not resolve the pain of your past, it will come back out in your marriage. And it is so important to identify where it's coming out, how it's affecting you. And what's nice about a spouse is they can tell you where you're going wrong. I'm always like, oh, this is where you could grow. But I appreciate that. I want him to do the same for me. And he has. He's helped me realize where I have anxiety. He said this to me, and it's true. When things are chaotic, I can sometimes come in, and because I can be more anxious, I can leap to control, try and take over, make things even more chaotic than they already were, because I'm so desperate to take control over the situation. Realizing like marriage is very sanctifying for the fact that I realized my flaws. Like I am a very controlling person, and I didn't realize it. Anxiety and control can go hand in hand, and I did not realize how bad I had anxiety or how much I desire control until I was married. And you know, that is a blessing because it's making me a better person. It's showing me where I need to grow, but it's also really painful and hard. And that's why seeking professional help, if you need a counselor. I went to therapy on and off for like 12 years. I had an eating disorder for many years, and I needed healing from that. And because of the work I did all those years ago, it really gave me a lot of tools to be able to handle the situations now, and I'm much more able to discern when I'm anxious, because I was so activated I couldn't even identify what the feeling was. Now I can see, okay, I'm starting to feel anxious. I need to do my breath work. I need to say a few affirmations. Maybe I need to remove myself from the situation, take a few deep breaths, and then come back at it with new fresh eyes, or ask the Lord to like help me in that moment. Something that gives me a lot of anxiety where, you know, like I don't have the ability to remove myself from the situation is when I'm driving in the car with my kid and they both start screaming. My kids hate the car. Everybody else's kids seem to love the car, and they just like are fine in the car and can drive in the car, and people talk about how, oh, well, my kid wouldn't stop crying. I just take them in the car and they fall asleep. Not my kids. My kids hate the car. They've gotten better, so I shouldn't smite myself, but the car can be a serious place of anxiety, especially if we have to go to an appointment and I have no other choice. We are in the car. We're committed to the situation. I can't do anything about it. I'm driving. They're in the back seat and they're both screaming, crying. Something I started doing was praying the rosary. I'd put on a rosary CD or on YouTube a playlist, and I started praying the rosary. Even if they didn't stop crying, it made me feel so much better. A lot of times it actually makes them stop crying. They are big fans of the rosary, my boys, which is like so cool to see because they're only 1 and 2, but they already love the rosary. I just hope that continues. My third tip to be a good wife is to be forgiving. Marriage requires you to forgive. This person is your best friend. You live with them. You may have kids with them and parent with them. There's a lot of times where we're not perfect. I'm not perfect. My husband's not perfect. Little tiffs will come up, little hurts will come up, but both of us are very good at forgiving each other. Forgiving and letting go. Like some people forgive and then they punish forever and bring up. I can almost forget something like that. If it's done and resolved, it's out of my brain like it never happened. My brain just deletes it and I'm like, it's done, it's over. There is one circumstance that I had a really hard time forgiving my husband for, and it wasn't even his fault. It was out of his control. I made a bunch of videos about this, but my husband went away for 2 months for work in Korea. He went to another country. I was left alone, very last minute notice. I had like a week's notice where I thought we were all going as a family, and then the week before we were set to go, his company said me and the kids couldn't go. I was without my choice, left to parent our 6-month-old and 1.5-year-old, and my 6-month-old was not sleeping at all through the night. He'd be up 4 to 6 times a night. It was brutal. It was brutal. It's almost a year since he went away and I'm still not over it. But time heals all wounds. I'm in a much better place about what happened and I have peace over what happened. I went through it. Although my husband didn't technically do anything wrong, I was deeply hurt by that whole situation. That's the thing that's kind of wild, is like somebody could not do something wrong, but it still can hurt you. Like, he didn't do anything wrong. He did what was right for our family, but the whole thing really hurt me and it was really hard on me and I felt very alone and I felt abandoned. And although none of those things were his fault, I still had to get over them. I still had to forgive him for it. I had to identify where those resentments were coming up in my life. Talking through things is helpful. I have a spiritual director. I don't have a therapist, and a therapist and a spiritual director are not the same thing, but a spiritual director really helps you work through what you're holding on to spiritually, where you're leaving God out in your life, help you discern what God's trying to tell you in something. And that's been extremely helpful for me. I go once a month. My spiritual director is a mom of 5 adults. She's already been through motherhood. She knows what my experiences are, and that was very important for me. I wanted a spiritual director that was farther along in life than me, but also a mom and had that kind of wisdom and perspective. Being able to talk through those hurts, bring them to Christ, pray through them with somebody else that's also been through not the same thing but similar things, really, really has helped me immensely. And that's why, again, seeking counsel, but also being able to forgive. There is a difference between shaming and venting. Sometimes you need to get something off your chest. It's better to let it out than hold on to it, but it's like how you let it out, the words you choose. You have to be tactful. And also, my husband doesn't need to hear me go on and on about how hurt I was forever. Nobody wants to hear that. I wouldn't want to hear that. You have to let it go. When it comes back up and it's already been resolved, just say I'm giving this to you, Jesus. Help me to forgive in your name, Jesus. I'm putting this at the foot of your cross. I know that you can handle this. I know that you can take it from me. I'm giving it to you. And every time something comes up that is a hurt that you've already forgiven for, bring it back to Jesus, because sometimes your spouse doesn't need to hear about the things that you're feeling all the time. I don't think men have that kind of capacity. Even though I have the most lovely, understanding husband who listens to me all the time, that's why having a relationship with the Lord, number one, is the number one, because he can work through everything with you and he never gets tired of you. He never gets tired of hearing about your problems. My 4th tip is to always be a safe person for your spouse. The first tip and this tip are my most important tips. I guess being forgiving is really important too, but I see this a lot. You don't want to be a police officer or a jail warden, as I say, to your spouse. You want them to be your partner. You want to be the safe person they go to. You want them to feel safe telling you things. You want your husband to be honest with you, and you want to be your husband's safe person. Then you cannot, when they confide in you, flip out. I just try to encourage Matt to always feel like he can tell me anything. And when he tells me something that is hard for me to handle, I do not shame him for that. I don't make him feel bad about it. I can say if something bothered me or say if something's not okay, and we can make a plan together about how that will not occur again. I always want Matt to feel like he can tell me anything and he can come to me for anything. I want to be his safe person, and part of being a safe person is not throwing something in someone's face if they've told you something in confidence, not making them feel bad about something that they're weak in, just being there and being supportive for them. That being said, if someone's struggling in something, having a game plan and seeing them take action is important. That is important. Being accountable is important. You want to be your spouse's teammate. You want to be their cheerleader, but you never want to be their jail warden or someone they feel like they can't turn to. You don't want to have a weird parental relationship with your spouse. You want them to feel like they can come to you with anything and you're going to make them feel safe and be there for them. And I love that about my husband. My husband always makes me feel safe. I think that's something I've heard in dating advice sometimes, where people are like, oh, women don't like men that make them feel safe. But honestly, I think that's the number one most attractive quality, is that my husband makes me feel safe. To be fully myself, fully unguarded with him, I feel like I can tell him anything and he'd always be there for me, and I want to be that person for him too. He could come to me with any situation or problem and I would make him feel better. I would be there for him. I would be his comforter and his consoler and his safe person. I hope you liked this video. If you have any marriage tips, I would love to hear what qualities you think is required to be a good wife. I am always learning about marriage. I am by no means an expert, but I am happily married, so I thought I'd share these tips with you, why I think our marriage works and why I think we're both really happy in it. I hope this video helped you, and if you like it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel.